Hi everyone, welcome to Making Decisions Throughout the Transfer Process. This seminar is recorded. This is presented by Sarah Pinchton and Elena Lucetti. I'm going to hand it over to them to start the presentation.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. So welcome. As the title shows, we will be talking about making decisions throughout the transfer process. So hopefully at this point you've met with either Sarah or myself, maybe started thinking about which colleges and which programs you'll be applying to. Maybe you've already applied and gotten some information back about your acceptance and financial aid packages, and now it's time to make some decisions. Or maybe you've done that initial research and you're trying to choose more specifically which programs and colleges you'll be applying to. Are there any questions before we get started about specifics? Awesome. All right. So how to choose a college. This is kind of an overview of what we'll be talking about today and some basic structure on how to navigate through this decision-making process and the information you should be looking for. Is this good? Are we seeing this?
Yep.
All right. All right. So here are some steps on what you should be thinking about through the decision-making process. The first one here says 2-year, 4-year. Most likely you all will be finishing your time here and moving on to a 4-year college. So we kind of know that, but something to think about, public versus private, okay? Those will have different options as institution. Deciding how much money you can spend. So at this point, hopefully you've done some research to at least find out ballpark numbers, or maybe you've applied and it's time to compare your financial aid packages. You want to take a look not just on the different majors that the program has to offer, but their department as a whole. Are they getting funding for specific research? Do they have community ties and connections for internship opportunities? Okay, so taking a look at the department, the faculty as a whole. So that's part of the research process. Apply and see where you get accepted. Of course, that helps narrow things down a little bit more. You want to visit the campus. Right now, a lot of that is done virtually. You can still get a lot of information by doing virtual tours of the campus if you can't make it there in person. Check out their extracurricular departments, activities, clubs. You're going to be spending a lot of time there, obviously. So how else are you going to fill your time at that campus so you can feel a part of the community outside of just your classes and things? Next is a little bit more about the climate of the college. How friendly are the people? How much interaction will you have with your instructors outside of class? Are you in a town? Are you in a city? How much can you adapt to the community that you'll be in? What are the general views of the people in that community? Do they align with your values and your views? Taking a look at the housing opportunities. Are you looking to live on campus? Once again, is it a community? Is it a college town, right? These things all have different feels to them. And ultimately, trusting your instinct. Does it feel right? For some folks, that's a little bit more intuitive than others, you know, if you're getting that kind of gut feeling. But hopefully, Sarah and I will be able to give you enough information so you can feel confident in your decision making throughout this process. Now that I've kind of given an overview, any questions before we go forward?
I think we're in good shape.
All right.
All right, so the first thing that we'll go a little bit more in depth with is picking a major. So you may have a really specific major at Mount Wachusett, right? Maybe you're doing chemistry or human services or something like that, that feels like the next choice is really obvious. I'm going to keep doing chemistry. I'm going to keep doing human services. But it might not be quite that simple. And it might also be that you're coming out of liberal arts or interdisciplinary studies, or even that maybe you have learned after these first 2 years that this major isn't quite a perfect fit for you. So looking at shifting things up a little bit. So things to think about when looking to that 4-year school is sort of, what does the school offer within that major? Are there specific opportunities like internships or practicums or things like that that are really exciting to you and that maybe one school offers and another school doesn't? Same thing with concentrations. So rather than minoring in a particular area, maybe you want to be a business major, but with a concentration in marketing. Or maybe you want to do, I'm trying to think about other concentrations off the top of my head, which are now failing me. But something to sort of specialize that major a little bit that might be unique to a certain school. Some schools are going to have more concentrations and that might make things a little bit more particular. A minor is going to be something that's, not quite as robust as a major and will be new to a lot of people. Coming from Mount Wachusett, we don't really have minors. So another way to sort of specialize that degree, I can tell you I was an English major, but I minored in psychology. So I didn't take quite as many classes, but I got that feel and I got that taste and was able to specialize my degree a little bit. So again, narrowing that search down to schools that offer these things that are interesting to you and things that can make a school a little bit unique. And like I said before, maybe you were that chemistry major and it seems like it's a really sure thing, but maybe there is a concentration within chemistry at a certain school that's really interesting to you, or a minor that maybe at one school you can pair with chemistry, but at another school they're going to tell you, no, you can't be a math minor with chemistry at this school. So that can kind of help making that decision. The other thing to think about is sort of close enough majors. So, are there majors that maybe weren't quite the dream? Maybe you really wanted specifically counseling psychology, but the school that you're interested in doesn't have that. Is that okay? And I think one of the things that will kind of narrow this down and make it really clear that all of this stuff is really great to consider, but that might not be the be all end all, is the marriage is not a major is not a marriage. It doesn't sort of set you up for this path for life. Yeah, Elaine, if you want to click that. So what this is going to show is maybe you have this perfect major in mind that you think is going to lead to having all of your dreams come true. And that might be the case. There are certainly fields, right? If you want to be a kindergarten teacher, you're going to want a degree in elementary education. Right? If you want to be an engineer, you're going to want an engineering degree. But within a lot of other fields, there's a lot of wiggle room. So just looking at these three in particular, we're looking at English, political science, and psychology. And I'm sure a lot of students would tell you that these are totally different majors for people with totally different interests. But if you look and scroll through, these are sort of jobs or different career fields within these three majors. You're going to see that all three of them work in education or be an educator. You're going to see all three of them say work in business. You're going to see that all three of them, have these skills that move across the different, lots of different fields, and that you're not locked in. So that sort of gets into, should you be looking for the perfect school, or should you be looking for the perfect major? And the answer is somewhere in between, in my personal opinion, that, if you want to be an engineer, you can't go to a school without an engineering degree path. Or if, you want to be something with chemistry, I'll keep coming back to that one today. And if a school doesn't have that program and you're looking at just English and psychology, well, that's not quite going to do it, no matter how much you love the school. But if the school has something close enough that maybe after a little bit of research you learn will lead you to some similar paths and you do love the school, that's a great thing to look at. On the other side of that coin, if it's the perfect major, but you've gone on tour and you hated everything else about the school, maybe that's not the school for you either. All right, so now the money side of things. I feel like this jumps around a little bit differently than I originally thought. So you found the perfect school, you found the major you want, and now you are figuring out what comes next. So how to understand that financial aid package, right? Maybe coming from Mount Wachusett, you're used to being funded by mostly grants, or maybe a mix of grants and loans, and you're not used to having to come up with money, either out of pocket or seeking loans through another way, or maybe really applying aggressively for scholarships. So one of the first things I always tell any student who's met with me knows, I say apply to 2 schools. If for no other reason, then you can compare these financial aid offers and see if somewhere ends up being a slightly better fit. So every school is going to break down that financial aid offer a little bit differently, but you will ultimately end up with sort of what the school is going to actually cost you, whether that's in loans or in money you have to take out of pocket.
And just a reminder and plug for us, Sarah, right? This presentation isn't meant to give you the information and say, here, do this on your own, right? It's a guide for maybe some expected conversations that you'll have when you set up an appointment to meet with Sarah or myself to discuss these things a little bit more in depth, right? So we are certainly here to help you understand that financial aid package, right? As Sarah mentioned, you probably haven't seen some of these maybe other grant types or different types of loans that you might get offered. So we're really here to help you navigate this whole decision-making process.
Absolutely. And just in terms of, right, thinking from the beginning of like what you can afford, I think one of the things that's really worth pointing out is you can check. College Board is a great website to check for sort of a sticker price for a college. You're really, really, really unlikely to pay sticker price for a college. So it's a tool to look at, but it shouldn't be your stopping point. You know, I can certainly understand seeing that a school costs 40 or 50 or 60 grand a year is going to make a lot of people say, there's no way it's worth that much. I'm just going to look at these more affordable colleges that are looking like they're going to cost more like $10,000 or $20,000 a year. My line that I overuse is don't be your own gatekeeper there. You never know what's going to be available in terms of financial aid and scholarships. And sometimes those schools that look like they have a bigger sticker price might actually end up being the more affordable school compared to some of the other schools that seem cheaper at first. And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind, right, thinking about finding the perfect major and finding the climate that works for you and really loving a school is sort of finding the balance that I think once you've understood that financial aid package and you've applied to a few schools and you can see what something's going to cost you, I think the gut reaction for a lot of people is I'm going to go to the cheapest school. But that's not necessarily always the best choice. If the cheapest school was also your last choice of the schools you applied to, or after applying you found out about a really great program that some other college has that made you more excited about them, you know, I'm going to say it's probably you're not going to choose the most expensive school. The school ends up costing the most, but maybe one of those schools in the middle ends up being the best fit in terms of what the school offers you and what you're paying. There is value outside of just the dollars and cents, and that's a big part of conversations that you'll have with Elena and I.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about of the educational piece, you know, what major you might choose, minor, things like that, and the financial piece, right? Those are typically the two most common aspects talked about in our transfer meetings. But there's so much more when it comes to making a decision around which college is going to be the best fit for you to transfer to, right? So things like campus life and activities. How are you going to fill that time and space when you're outside of class? Okay, so are you interested in playing a sport, maybe some intramurals, if they have even just, you know, for fun or competitive leagues, different clubs. You might have been participating in a club here at MWCC, or you're interested in getting into a club for the first time. You want to check it out, see if they have a robotics club, or if they have an art club, right? Finding some of these activities and clubs that are of interest to you that, like Sarah said, adds value, right? So when you're looking to make this decision, what are those things that are going to help weigh your decision? What's adding value? So outside of your time in the classroom, are there, what type of, going back to, is it a city or is it a town? Like, what community events are around there? Is there some place for you to get a job? Is there a chain restaurant that you worked at that maybe they also have in that town, and you're interested in continuing that, or trying something new for the first time, right? So kind of getting a big picture of the town, of the campus, different activities and things that you can participate, especially if they're related to your major, and maybe might be some resume builders, helping you get experience before you join, the job force, things like that. Sarah, am I getting everything? Can you think of anything else that we wanted to hit here with campus life and activities?
So yeah, I mean, outside of the sort of more academic things that we're talking about, like the clubs and sports and involvement, I think one of the things that comes up a lot is whether or not a school has a reputation as a party school, and whether or not you're comfortable with that. And I think it's just worth noting that these reputations are maybe long-lived, and may not represent a school. Was maybe true of a school 10 or 15 years ago, might not be true of a school now. But also on any big campus that maybe has that reputation, and I think, Elena, you can speak to this as a UMass alum, that you can still make choices about whether or not you participate in that culture. At a lot of schools. That said, if you are looking for a party school, maybe then choosing the tiny campus somewhere with no reputation as a party school, maybe even a school that avoids partying. You want to look at that. These are social pieces that are going to weigh really differently for different people. So just something to note, that those school reputations aren't always true.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. And just knowing what options you have within the campus itself, right? Are there maybe honors dorms, or are there dorms that honor maybe different rules where they have earlier kind of lights out community, so there's less of a noisy community, right? If you're someone who really likes your sleep, that's if you're thinking of living on campus, right? How all of these factors play into your overall experience that you'll be having on campus. I want to reiterate again, and Sarah, you've mentioned this, going to a school that's in a more rural kind of college town versus more of a college that's plopped in the middle of a city, they're going to have very different feels, right? So right now it might be harder to get specifically on a campus, but you can still maybe drive through town, check out what stores are in the area. Do you have to drive 20 minutes to get to Target, right? That might not seem like a big deal to some people, but for some it might be a deal breaker, right? How far is your commute home? How far is your commute to your favorite store? Is there public transportation if you're not bringing your car to campus, right? finding that vibe and that feel of the campus and the community itself.
Perfect.
And that kind of leads into our next slide about overall campus climate and environment, right? So is it a big school in a big city? Is it, or a small school in a big city? Or is it a big school or a smaller school in a more rural climate, right? You'll certainly get different feels from these different type schools. A lot of students value and care about class sizes. Okay, so know if you're going to UMass Amherst and you're taking intro to chemistry, you might be in a 200-person lecture hall for that course, right? For some of your introductory courses that you still might need to take. So are you looking for an experience where you're one of many in a lecture hall, or do you know yourself and know that you want smaller class sizes of maybe 25 and you're getting some more personalized instruction? In general, what are the values of the campus? Their inclusivity of different cultures, that might include religion as well. If you're looking for a campus that has a chapel or a place of worship on there for you, or in general, the town or city that you're moving to, right? Figuring out what those values are of the town, of the campus in general. Do you have any do's and don'ts, or what am I thinking of here, Sarah? Like hard lines that you're looking for.
Yeah.
It needs to have this, it can't have that, right? So having those at the forefront when you're visiting these campuses or checking them out online. Is there anything in particular that you're looking for that you need to have, or that if there's something that you see, you say, no, that's probably not for me in that decision-making process?
Yeah, I would add two pieces to this. One, in terms of class sizes, if you are thinking somewhere like a UMass or a UNH or a UConn that do have those bigger classes, if you're staying in your same major and sort of doing like a seamless transfer to one of those schools, you are unlikely to have many or any at all classes that are in huge lecture halls. So if that's one of your fears of a big school, that would be a great question to ask someone from admissions. You know, hey, am I going to need any classes, you know, after I transfer that would be these huge classes? Because I think sometimes you might really love the idea of that big school, but have a little bit of fear of those huge lectures. And you might be past that by being a transfer student. So that could be something a little bit different. Then with just regard to religion, there are a number of Catholic schools in the area. I went to 2 of them. And I can tell you that every school is really different with how much religion is sort of pushed. Some schools, you're really aware all the time that you are at a Catholic school, and other schools, it's really easy to forget that you're at a Catholic school. So I know I've definitely had a couple of students sort of rule in or rule out a school based on that. But that's another part of, you know, if you can, getting on campus and going for a tour, or just asking a lot of questions, you know, of anyone who is at that school, to get a real sense for, is that what you're looking for, whether it's not very religious or looking for a religious school, because that'll look really different depending on the school itself. All right, ranking system. This is my favorite. So keeping in mind everything that we sort of talked about today, but also, you know, other things, you know, that specifically, I think we've talked really generally about location, whether it's like urban or rural, but are you looking for something close to home, far from home? You looking to live in a dorm, all of that kind of stuff. So location is something to consider when you're narrowing down those lists of schools. I don't think we've talked much about the size of the school itself, right? Do you want something that's really small with 1,000 students? Do you want something huge with 20,000 students, or do you want something in between the environment? And to me, that can be anything from, right, those clubs and organizations we talked about, to the, you know, the surrounding community, all of that kind of stuff. But then other things that you want to look at when you're sort of narrowing down a school, admissions requirements. If one school has a deadline that's way, way, way ahead of all the other schools that you're looking at, and you think it would be a little bit of a stretch to get all of your admission stuff done by then, does that weigh on how important that school is to apply to you? Maybe a school is otherwise perfect, but requires SAT scores, even for transfer students, and you just do not want to go back and take the SAT if you never took it in high school. Does that change things for you? And then last, certainly not least, is academics. Is your major offered? If your major isn't offered, is there something really close or that leads to similar opportunities like we talked about? The class sizes, all of that kind of stuff. I've had students make their own charts like this that maybe take into consideration other things. I saw someone once really focused on what the music scene was in the community around the school. That was something that that she was really focused on. That was important. You know, maybe it's access to ski trails, right? Like whatever it might be, you might have something. We can certainly provide this particular sheet to sort of come up with what schools match what your the schools that match your personal goals and all of that kind of stuff. You can make your own that focuses on your stuff. This can also just be a great place to compile information. But I really have had a handful of students use a ranking system where they assign sort of points, you know, arbitrarily, but points for each one of these things, that the location is perfect or the major is perfect or all of that stuff, and then figures out numerically, okay, this school was 27 points and this one was 21, and sort of narrows down that list of maybe 10 schools to 3 or 4 top schools based on those interest areas. So this can be a really nice way to get in one sheet all of the basic information about a school from the research you've done, and then you get to prioritize what was most important to you when making those decisions, both about where to apply and then maybe after acceptance, you know, where to attend.
Another piece that I would add to this, or that I often see students weighing very strongly, and it all goes back to that scale, right? What are your must-haves, can't go without, what has more value? But one of the big ones is timeline, right? How many of your courses are going to transfer? How does that affect how much time you have left? Is it going to make it or break it if one program you need to take 2 more classes, but it's really the major that you wanted? Or is one program going to cut off maybe 2 whole semesters, right? All of these things to weigh pros and cons. And a great way is to use this tool, of course.
Absolutely. So I think, this was the end. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Any questions or anything you want to add or anything else? No?
So now that you've gotten this information, watched our presentation, kind of what do you do now? I know that was obviously a lot of information. Get on our calendars, set up an appointment with Sarah and I, and we're certainly here to help you navigate this decision-making process, helping you weigh those options and even getting you set up with one of those awesome charts that Sarah shared.
Perfect.
Thank you.
You are more than welcome. Thanks for coming. And we'll see everyone soon.